Boa noite a todos e a todas. É uma grande satisfação recebê-las e recebê-los nesta sala da congregação da Faculdade de Direito da Universidade de São Paulo, na condição de chefe de departamento de Direito Internacional e Comparado. Ninomiya Sensei asked me to speak in English, so let me change the standard. So it's a pleasure to have all of yours here with us to the speech of Professor Akiyama, who will talk us about nationality as a human right, a critical analysis of nationality, and a case study of Japan. I would like to ask to my colleague, Senior Professor Ninomiya Sensei, to make the presentation of our speaker.
So yes, I wanted to invite Professor Akiyama to come here in order to begin his lecture about the nationality law entitled Is Nationality a Human Right? So thank you very much, Professor Akiyama, and you have the word.
Standing or it's on. Yeah, okay.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I'm Hajime Akiyama, assistant professor at the University of Tsukuba in Japan. First of all, I would appreciate Professor Ninomiya for giving me this opportunity to give a lecture in the University of São Paulo, especially in this really wonderful building. Yesterday, I visited this campus and also this building, and I was really amazed by this building. And I've heard that this building and also this university's faculty of law has really long history. And I really want to learn from what the University of São Paulo was doing in the context of law. And I would like to work together with Ninomiya Sensei and faculty members of the University of São Paulo. And also, I would like to introduce that I have some students from the University of Tsukuba, and they come here. They came here yesterday with me, and we visited this campus today, and also we visited many places today in São Paulo, and we will move to Brasilia tomorrow, and we will attend a seminar by STJ. And I hope that this opportunity is really big opportunity for them. And so I hope if you can communicate with them in a recess or something, I think that would be a good opportunity for them as well. Okay, I was thinking what to talk in this seminar, because as I will tell you, I have some area of interest in my research, but because we do have Ninomiya Sensei here, I was thinking that maybe I can talk about issues related to nationality, because nationality and statelessness is one of my interests, and especially my dissertation, which was published in 2019, was really about statelessness and nationality. And when I was preparing for the dissertation, I still remember that I read your book. Then I really want to try to, as an academia, try to show a new, approach to think about nationality. So today, I would like to talk about nationality. And the title of this today's talk is Nationality a Human Right? A critical analysis of critical analysis of nationality and the case study of Japan. Some of you may feel that, oh, well, yeah, nationality can be regarded as a human right. Maybe for those who are thinking that way, you may be a specialist or expert on international law. But some of you, or many of you, may feel that, well, nationality and human rights, well, they may be related, but is nationality a human right? This question can be something really new. if you think that way, I think this is based on the understanding of traditional, national law or domestic law. And this area is really the kind of intersection of national law and international law. So I would like to try to bridge these two different kinds of law to think about the feature of nationality today. Okay. Okay, so this is a contents of my talk. First, I would like to introduce myself, and after that, I will talk about the basic understanding of nationality. But I will tell you the basic understanding of nationality, but my understanding of nationality is that understanding of nationality can vary, depends on how you understand nationality. So I would like to tell you my understanding of nationality. And of course, this is up to criticism or question. So obviously, I would like to have a discussion about it if you have a different understanding of it. And after that, I would like to introduce a concept of right to nationality, especially from the international legal perspective. And I would like to tell you how legal provisions can be related to the concept of right to nationality from international law and Japanese law. And at the end, I would like to offer a critical perspective of right to nationality. And maybe there can be many effects of nationality, so I would like to cover it. And at the end, I would like to talk about the Japanese or at least East Asian case to think about nationality. Okay, so first of all, I want to introduce myself, and I have some disciplines. And if I introduce myself or my identity, or I identify myself as a peace studies scholar. So what is peace, how peace can be realized, and what are obstacles to peace and these kind of things. But it's really difficult to think about peace, obviously. Then I have some disciplines, such as Japanese constitutional law, international law, and international organizations. I was interested in international organizations or international relations at first, but when I was studying about international relations, I found that international law is really interesting because although there is no world government, still there is something called international law. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but still it exists. Then I was really interested in international law. Then at that time, I was really interested in nationality and statelessness. Then what I learned was that I also need to study about domestic law, including the constitutional law, because nationality is basically a matter of each state. So that constitutional law or domestic law itself is really important. So I began studying about constitutional law. So this is how I developed my area of interest. So maybe here's a really important disclaimer for me. I was not educated as a law student when I was an undergraduate, but my interest kind of expanded. Then finally, I'm researching about international law and constitutional law. So maybe my, how to say, kind of way of making argument can be really different from traditional legal approach. I know that there are many shortcomings of it, but still I believe that there are some, meaning of it to look at law from different perspectives. So this is kind of my disciplines. Then my topics include nationality and statelessness. And well, this is exactly what I will talk today. And I'm also interested in the concept of right to life, because especially in the Japanese constitution, there's a provision of the right to life in the Japanese constitution, but still its meaning is not really deeply explored in the Japanese constitutional legal scholarship. So I would like to study about it further. And also recently, I'm interested in the concept of the post-Anthropocene. And I'm not too sure whether this concept is really well known or not, because Anthropocene may be something that you have heard of it, but not necessarily post-Anthropocene. And my understanding of post-Anthropocene is that how can we, whoever we are, how can we go beyond human-centric society. And I know that, especially from the legal perspective, okay, what are you talking about? I know that this is really different from how traditional legal or social sciences thinking kind of approaching any social issue. But recently, I'm really interested in the impact of climate change and how climate change or the environment, which is regarded as the outside of social sciences, how that kind of environment affects human society. So from that perspective, I would like to explore the possibility that whether can human go beyond human centrism. So obviously this is outside of the scope of the traditional legal studies, but I would like to have an interdisciplinary approach to think about the possibility of it. So this is my interest broadly. Then today I will cover the issues related to nationality and statelessness. And as I might not, but tell you, I'm an assistant professor of the Institute of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Tsukuba. This is the main affiliation, but I'm also working as a visiting partner associate professor at International Christian University in Tokyo. And I'm also working as a part-time lecturer of Rikyo Niza High School in the Japanese high school. And also, especially related to my specialization, I'm a co-representative of Stateless Network, which is NGO in Japan, which tries to raise awareness related to statelessness. So this is my self-introduction. And I want to briefly talk about my university because the reason why today I'm here is that I will go to Brasilia tomorrow and I will attend the seminar. Then why I go there is that I was invited as a kind of panelist in the seminar organized by SDJ. And I'm sure that the reason why I was invited was not necessarily I am a super clever scholar. Maybe I'm working at the University of Tsukuba, and the University of Tsukuba has really strong relationship with Brazil. So that I want to introduce my university a bit. So this is a map of Japan, and the University of Tsukuba is located in the Tsukuba Science City, which is the first science city in Japan, which is located around 70 kilometers northeast from Tokyo. And the campus looks like that. And so I'm not too sure whether this is similar to University of São Paulo, but obviously not around here. But it has a lot of kind of nature and trees, and I love this campus. And this is how this university looks like. And this university's mission is really related to my research. So I would like to talk about a bit of history of the University of Tsukuba. It was established in 1973 in the Tsukuba Science City, but there's a basis of the University of Tsukuba, which is called the Normal School, which is the very first higher education institution in Japan. And that institution was created in 1872. So a few years ago, in 2023, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of the University of Tsukuba, but it was also the 151st anniversary from the inception of the first organization which we are based on. And University of Tsukuba was established as a what we call new concept university, or I prefer the phrase of university with a new vision. And the reason is that when the University of Tsukuba was created, there was a really strong understanding that in the traditional Japanese universities, scholars tend to just look at the discipline that they are interested in. But if you look at any social issue, you can't just look at one particular discipline, but interdisciplinarity and openness in general was really important. Then when the University of Tsukuba was created, there were three features of it: interdisciplinarity, internationality, and communication with society. And these missions are really related to how law is taught in our university. In undergraduate level, we don't have college of law, but we do have a College of Social Sciences. And law major is one of the majors in the College of Social Sciences. The kind of main understanding is that law cannot be studied only in the context of law. We also need to think about sociology, politics, or economics. And these kind of different areas are also important to think about the feature of law. And also in graduate level, we do have programs in advanced and international Japanese studies, international public policy, and business sciences. And law, we don't have one particular program in law, but we do have different programs, and different programs approach law from different perspectives. And this is how our university really approach law. And we are planning to new graduate program in law from academic year 2027, and which tries to strengthen our feature of these three features in legal research and education. And what I will talk is really related to this, because I will try to compare internationally a bit, and also interdisciplinarity. I think you can notice interdisciplinarity, because I will mention the kind of politics understanding of nationality or nation or nationalism. So I hope by listening to this, you can understand the basic background of my presentation. All right, so I would like to talk about nationality, okay? Nationality. There are many different understandings of nationality, I believe. But if you look at nationality in international law's perspective, there's one understanding. It is written in the, this is a part of the understanding of the ICJ, International Court of Justice. It says nationality is a legal bond, having its basis a social fact of attachment. So what this indicates is the legal bond. So nationality is a legal bond. So legal concept in the first place. And there must be social fact of attachment. Attachment. Okay, so these two are really important concept in law. And the reason why I just referred to international law is that each state may have different understanding of nationality regarding domestic law. Then obviously I can't provide all understandings of so many different countries. So I think that it would be a good idea to look at this understanding of nationality. So I just referred to ICJ's understanding of nationality. Then I'm really interested in how nationality works in reality. I think this is another interesting point because, okay, nationality is a legal concept, right? Then it is a attachment is really related. Okay, but what does nationality mean in reality? And this is, to be honest, this is not necessarily clear. This is not necessarily clear. And this is really important because, for example, in this presentation, I will talk about the right to nationality. But what does it mean? What does right to nationality mean in the first place? In order to think about it, I think the meaning of nationality is really important. And features of nationality today, for example, according to one scholar, which I basically agree, is that nationality has a meaning of diplomatic protection. Diplomatic protection. So if someone has a risk to life, for example, in another country, then the state of nationality may be able to intervene in order for that state to protect its nationals. So this is called diplomatic protection. This is one understanding. And second one is readmission or admission and residence. So for example, I have Japanese nationality and I don't have any other nationality. In such a case, I can stay in Japan because I do have Japanese nationality. And if well, for example, I'm Brazil now, then if I come back to, go back to Japan, I suppose I can go back to Japan. Why is it? It's because I do have nationality of Japan. So readmission or admission and residence is the second feature. And the third one is, I think this is really interesting. The third one is the basis of human rights. Basis of human rights. And there's one phrase called the right to have rights. So nationality is a right to have rights, which I basically agree. But this is really interesting because if you have nationality, do you have or is is your human rights always guaranteed? I think this is really a big question. So I think this kind of relationship between human rights and nationality, whether human rights can be protected based on nationality or not, may depend on the state. So I think this is one point of question. But basically, I think as a textbook understanding, they are typical understanding. Then how do I understand the most important feature of nationality? For me, the most important feature of nationality is a right to stay in a territory without specific and explicit approval by the government. For example, as I mentioned, I do have Japanese nationality and not any other nationality. And in such a case, what happens is that I can stay in Japan without asking the Japanese government to give me approval to be in Japan. I think this is really important. Of course, when I go to Brazil, then like when I come back to Japan, obviously the government may have opportunity to refuse it. But if I stay in Japan, then there is no opportunity for me to be deported to any other country. So I think this is really important because when you think about statelessness, it's really difficult. So if you are stateless, you may not be able to live in a state which you don't have that nationality. Because stateless people do not have any nationality, which means that in theory, at least in theory, they don't have any state which they can live without the specific and explicit approval. Okay, so for example, as I mentioned, I have Japanese nationality, and when I came to Brazil, the Brazilian government might be able to refuse me because it does have sovereignty, and if the Brazilian government doesn't like me, it does have a right to say no. But fortunately, I could come. But this is just because the Brazilian government approved it, right? So I think this, but in case of Japan, the Japanese government basically doesn't have right to say whether Hajime Akiyama is a right person to be in Japan or not, because I do have Japanese nationality. So in this sense, right to stay in a territory without specific and explicit approval by the government, I think this is the most important feature of nationality today. Okay, then how can nationality be acquired? And basic principle is that each state can give a nationality to who they wish to give. So basically, each state can decide who each state wish to. Oh, thank you. Who each state wish to give a nationality to. And there are some ways to confer nationality. One kind of big category is by birth and after birth. By birth and after birth. And by birth is nationality is acquired when you are born. Nationality is acquired when you are born. And I would say, I don't have any specific data, but I would say 80 or 90, or maybe a bit less, but at least 60 or 70% of people acquires nationality by birth. And this is the only occasion that they do get nationality. So acquisition of nationality by birth is really important in practice. And the second one is after birth. After birth. And after birth, like one example of acquisition of nationality after birth is naturalization. Naturalization. Of course, there are many people who acquires any particular nationality by naturalization, but the effect of acquisition of nationality by birth and acquisition of nationality by naturalization is really different. So I would like to talk about it. So basically, one difference between nationality by birth and after birth is that nationality by birth is not something, acquisition of nationality by birth is not something each state can decide in kind of each single case. Basically, state decides when nationality is acquired in principle, and that principle is applied. So then there are two principles. One is called jus soli, another one is called jus sanguinis. And jus soli is that location of birth confers nationality. So if you are born in Brazilian territory, then you acquire a Brazilian nationality. So this is jus soli. And another one is jus sanguinis. And jus sanguinis means that the parents of the child confers a nationality. And for example, Japan basically adopts this jus sanguinis principle. And so they are two different ways to confer nationality by birth. And after birth, naturalization, this naturalization system, but naturalization is given with discretion of the government. So whether someone acquires a nationality by naturalization, this really depends on how each government evaluate that person's qualification. So in that sense, for the perspective of each individual, I would say acquisition of nationality by birth is really important because basically law determines who acquires nationality. But in case of naturalization, not necessarily law, but usually the administration decides. So in that sense, the relationship between law and administration is really important, especially in the context of naturalization, whereas in acquisition of nationality by birth, basically law is really important. So I think this is really different two kinds of acquisition of nationality. And I would like to introduce you how can Japanese nationality be acquired. Basically, Japanese nationality is given by jus sanguinis. So when you have a Japanese parents, you acquire a Japanese nationality. Basically, jus sanguinis is a traditional principle that the Japanese government has, but there was a kind of one big change in history. Until 1984, Japan used to adopt the jus sanguinis through the paternal line. Jus sanguinis through the paternal line, which means that only Japanese fathers could confer nationality or transmit the nationality to their children, and Japanese mothers could not. But that law was changed in 1984 and 5. So it was changed in 1984, but it came into effect in 1985. And since then, not only Japanese fathers, but also Japanese mothers began to be able to transmit a nationality to their children. So this is a big change, but basically jus sanguinis is really important principle in the Japanese history. But there's one really important exception in the Japanese, how the Japanese nationality is conferred. So as an exception, jus soli is also applied. So when you are born in Japan, sometimes that location determines you can acquire a Japanese nationality, but this is only a limited case. So according to the Nationality Act, it says, if you are born in Japan and both of the parents are unknown or they are without nationality, which means stateless. So in such a case, you can acquire a Japanese Japanese nationality. So this is a kind of limited application of jus soli. So basically jus sanguinis, but there are some cases that jus soli can be adopted. This is how Japanese nationality can be acquired. And I'm so sorry, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but because I was to talk in Brazil, I was really interested in how Brazilian nationality was conferred. And I tried to kind of compare these two countries. So Japan, basically in Japan, there's Japanese Nationality Act, and Nationality Act plays a really important role. Because in the Constitution, there is a provision on nationality, but it says nothing. Because Article 10 says the conditions necessary for being a Japanese national shall be determined by law. All right. So who are Japanese nationals? This is not determined by the Constitution, but it says look at law. Then which law? This is a nationality law. Then according to the Japanese nationality law, jus sanguinis as a principle and jus soli in limited cases. And interesting thing, especially from the comparative perspective, is that when you look at Brazilian constitution, you can see who becomes a Brazilian nationals. So who can acquire Brazilian nationality. According to Article 12 of the Constitution, I believe, it basically says that the jus soli is a principle. And jus sanguinis can be applied, but in case of children born outside of Brazil. So, but I would say Brazil has kind of wider scope compared to Japan, but I think this is really interesting comparison. One is that Japan basically adopts the jus sanguinis, and Brazil basically adopts the jus soli. And especially jus soli is applied in many Latin American countries. And I think it is really related to the history of the country, because especially when you are talking about the state which was created as a result of migration, they often adopt the jus soli. Well, for understandable reason, because the parents doesn't really decide whether that person has a commitment to the state or not. It's more like whether you are born or not. So I think this is understandable reason. And from that perspective, Japan adopts the jus sanguinis system, which means that Japan is not necessarily regarded as a migrant country, which is understandable. But I think this is one comparison that you can make. And another comparison is that in Brazil, the constitution determines who Brazilian are. And this is really interesting because I'm not really knowledgeable about this kind of comparison, but there are a certain number of states which determines the scope of nationals in the constitution. Understandable, because who have nationality, I think this is really important in the first place. So this is understandable, but Japan doesn't say who the Japanese nationals are in the constitution. And in my dissertation, I was studying about the reason why the Japanese constitution doesn't say who the Japanese nationals are. And Japan, historically speaking, there are two constitutional laws. So this is what we call, we don't really call any particular constitution, but like we do have constitution, the current constitution. And we do have also another constitution called Meiji Constitution, Meiji Constitution. And that Meiji Constitution was created in 1889. And related to this provision of the conditions necessary for being a Japanese national shall be determined by law. This is really similar to the previous constitution in 1889. But there's one difference. It says Japanese nationals, but the former constitution says Japanese subjects instead of Japanese nationals. The reason is that in the current constitution, the Japanese people has sovereignty. But in the former, what we call Meiji Constitution, sovereignty was something that the emperor had. And Japanese people are regarded as a subject of the emperor. So this is one, well, very big difference, but in terms of the structure of the sentence, basically the same. So I was researching why the Japanese constitution in 1889 did not determine who the Japanese nationals were in the constitution. And I found really interesting kind of evidence. That was really related to the process of the establishment or the preparation of the constitution. In 1889, the reason why the Japanese government created the constitutional law is really related to modernization. I think I will talk about it in a next here we go. So the first Japanese constitution was called the Constitution of the Empire of Japan. And the reason why this constitution was created was that Japan used to adopt what is called the isolation policy from around 1639 until at the end of 19th century. But there was what is called the black ships, and black ships came to Japan. Black ships were American ships, United States of America, USA, American ships. And they called for kind of opening of Japan. And since then, Japan decided to open the state. But at that time, the Japanese government looked at around kind of Asia. Then what the elites of Japan found out was that Japan needs to modernize. Otherwise, Japan can be the colony of a particular, in that context, Western state. So in order to prevent that, modernization was really important. And in order to do so, the constitution was created. And there are two ways to learn how Western states created the modern constitution. One is that there were certain number of students or young people who were sent to Europe to learn the Western legal system. For example, Hirobumi Ito, who is really well-known person in Japan, he went to Europe to study how European constitutions were created. And another one is that the Japanese government hired some foreign advisors, and they came to Japan. And there are some foreign advisors who advised not to include the specific provisions of nationality in the constitution. The reason why they said that was that the constitution is not something that you can change easily, so that you should have in mind that. Then the issues related to nationality can be changed, depends on the development of international society or international relations, so that in order to make it easy to amend the kind of scope of nationality, the Japanese government should not include a particular method to confer nationality in the constitution. And the Japanese government accepts that, then this current structure was created. So I think it's really interesting also to think about how these different structure came into existence, because there's a kind of historical reason behind it. All right, then I would like to move on to the concept of conflict of nationality laws, because nationality, as I said, nationality is one concept that we can discuss, but there is another concept called the conflict of nationality laws. So if you have one nationality, it's kind of one type, but there are some other possibilities. One is that you don't have any nationality. This is called statelessness. Another one is called you have several nationalities, more than one. So 2, 3, or 4, or even 5 nationalities. And this is called positive conflict of nationality law. And I think one important assumption is that the conflict of nationality laws occurs because each state determines who they wish to include or exclude. And this is related to the assumption that each state can decide who the nationals are. Because each state can basically decide who the nationals are, if, for example, the Japanese government and Brazilian government, if both of them wish to include some people as a national, then they both of some people acquire both nationalities, for example. But if there are people who none of the government wish to include as a national, then there is a statelessness. So this is, I think, really important assumption here. And this is really related to the concept of the nation state system in politics. And when you look at the history of nationality, the French Revolution is really important background. And when you look at that, I think it's really important for us to be aware that as a basis of nationality, there's something called a nation. And that nation is kind of supported by the idea called the nationalism. So nationality itself is really a legal understanding, but there's a that legal understanding has a root of political understanding of the nation or nationalism. So I think this relationship is really important for us to understand how the scope of nationality is determined, because this determines why, for example, the Japan adopts the jus sanguinis, whereas Brazil basically adopts jus soli. So I think this basic background of nationalism or nation are really important. And I would like to move on to the concept of right to nationality, right to nationality. I would like to explain that the concept of right to nationality is the concept of the intersection of human right and nationality. And legally speaking, it has a history from 1948, because in Article 15 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says everyone has the right to a nationality. And I think this is the first international document which tries to combine the concept of human rights and nationality. And the reason why the UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, is called UDHR, and why the UDHR was UDHR included the concept of the right to nationality is there's the experience of Holocaust in Germany, and that was a very significant background. So many Jews became stateless, so that in order to prevent that in the future, this provision of the everyone has the right to nationality was created. And after that, after the UDHR, increasing number of international documents tried to link the concept of nationality and human rights. So they are, I just listed, I don't say, details here. I will talk about it a bit in later, but basically, there are some international legal documents. 1930 Convention on certain questions relating to the conflict of nationality laws. Actually, this is the first international law which tries to cover issues related to nationality, both in the context of statelessness and dual nationality. So basically, everyone should have one nationality, and no nationality and many nationalities, both of them are not really good. So that in order to prevent that, how to do was provided in the 1930 convention. But one interesting point is that although statelessness and dual nationality were regarded as not good thing, this was not in the context of human rights, but it's more like the perspective of state interest instead of human rights. The reason is that in international law, the concept of human rights did not evolve, did not develop until the end of World War II. So that in that context, actually nationality was covered by international law, but not necessarily from the perspective of human rights. But that game changed after the end of World War II. So UDHR is one of them. This is really the beginning of that. And after that, 1954 Convention on the Nationality of Married Women, because around that time, there was one concept or even norm that was regarded that one family or one partnership should have one nationality. So if in case of international marriage, there was a bit of problem. Then there were some cases that married women could become stateless. So in order to deal with that, this 1957 convention was created. And in 1961, Convention on Reduction of Statelessness was created. And this is kind of holistic convention, try to deal with preventing or trying to prevent statelessness. And after that, International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights, Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women, Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They are kind of general international, human rights treaties in international law, and they cover nationality from different perspectives. Then there are kind of some examples, and I would like to say, well, I don't go into detail for each criteria, but I would say some conventions cover prevention of statelessness, acquisition of nationality, promotion of naturalization, prohibition of arbitral deprivation of nationality, change of nationality, prevention of nationality loss, transmission of a nationality, and preservation of a nationality. And what I want to say is that all of them, well, 1930 convention is a kind of exception, but at least from the UDHR, all of them basically tries to combine the concepts of human rights and nationality. But all of them kind of provides for different things. So what I want to say is that there's a concept that the nationality and human rights should be kind of discussed in the one context, but still each treaty provides for different things. So there's no kind of one simple understanding of the right to nationality. Okay, then how can you see these concepts of right to nationality in the Japanese law? I would say the Japanese law does not recognize nationality as a human right. Maybe, I don't know, if there is someone who have ideas about the Brazilian context, I'm really interested in listening to it. But at least in the Japanese context, I would say the nationality is not regarded as a human right. And as a result, what happens is that, for example, statelessness can take place and nationality can be lost. So I think this is one interesting perspective to approach nationality from statelessness perspective. And I would like to tell you the kind of specific issues in the Japanese law related to the right to nationality. But before that, I would like to say one thing. In the Japanese constitutional law, Article 14, it provides for the equality before the law. And I wrote both of them in English and Japanese. For Japanese readers, you may be able to see the difference between them, but actually the Japanese constitution is really interesting because it does have official Japanese and it does have, I think, provisional English translation. But interesting thing is that if you look at the history of the Japanese, the drafting of the Japanese constitution, I'm not too sure which one is a genuine one. The reason is that when you look at the history of the Japanese constitution, the current Japanese constitution was first drafted by SCAP, what is called Supreme Commander of Allied Powers, I think, and which is basically the United States. And based on that draft, the Japanese government and Japanese diet discussed about it, and there were significant changes. So I don't say that the Japanese constitution was completely created by the U.S. people, but still, the draft was created by the U.S. people in English. Then that was translated into Japanese. But in Japan, according to the acts on court, Japanese is the only language to be used in the court. So obviously the Japanese version is regarded as a genuine one. But still, English is the kind of basis of the current Japanese constitution. I think this is really interesting. But another interesting point is that in English, it says all of the people. And in Japanese, it says すべて国民は, and 国民 can be regarded and translated as a nationals, or the people who has a Japanese nationality. And people can be translated into 人々, like people, regardless of nationality. So which one should be the kind of genuine one? I think this is kind of interesting discussion, but I would say basically the Japanese version is a genuine one. So nationals is more valid interpretation. So I think this is kind of one important issue, I think, because if you try to look at the Japanese law, looking at the English translation by the Japanese government, even though this is not official one, provisional one, still there is a kind of different wording in English and Japanese. So if you just look at English, then it's really difficult to understand the genuine meaning in Japanese. And so equality before the law, especially at least among nationals, I think this is one important concept. But there are some issues related to the right to nationality and the equality before the law. For example, when a Japanese national acquires a foreign nationality, then the Japanese citizens, well, this is just a quote, Japanese citizens or nationals lose Japanese citizenship or nationality, which means that if Japanese nationals acquire another nationality, you use Japanese nationality. Second one is reservation of Japanese nationality is necessary for a Japanese national who acquires a foreign nationality because he or she was born abroad in order to preserve Japanese nationality. I think one easy scenario is that when Japanese couples deliver the child in Brazil, because in Brazil, jus soli is a basic method to confer nationality. So I believe that that child can acquire Brazilian nationality in principle. In such a case, the Japanese nationality can be lost if if that child or the parents of that child does not notify that they wish to reserve or keep the Japanese nationality. Otherwise, they lose Japanese nationality. The third one is that Japanese nationals with different nationalities need to choose either nationality by the age of 20. So if you have several nationalities, including Japan, then you need to choose by 20. Otherwise, the Japanese nationality can be lost. And my argument is that they can conflict with the idea of equality before the law. Why is it? It's because according to Japanese law, at least in the Article 14, Japanese people are equal. Japanese people are equal. Like for me, my interpretation is that regardless of whether you have different nationality or not, if you are Japanese nationality, you should be equal. But if you do have different nationality, why do you need to give up one of the nationalities? This is my argument. So Japanese are equal, and why whether a specific Japanese national has another nationality or both born abroad create a different treatment compared to the Japanese people who only has one Japanese nationality. So this is my interpretation, and this kind of issue is not really discussed in Japan. I don't know why. Maybe nationality is really the fundamental idea, or not necessarily human rights, but it's more like a state-related matters. Maybe this is the reason. But if you take nationality as a right to have rights, I would say equality should be applied in that context as well. So I would like to problematize it. And I wrote that paper in Japanese. Then that paper was kind of influential. I was really surprised that I sometimes find that this paper was referred to some of the authors. So I was a bit surprised. But yeah, I'm really interested in your reaction as well. And at the end, I would like to say critical perspectives of right to nationality. So until now, I said that, well, right to nationality can be a really important concept, but I would like to offer some critical perspectives. I have some questions. First question is, can or should we couple human rights and nationality? The concept of nationality and human rights, are they related, or should we relate them? Because if they are related, for example, if there is a stateless person, okay, well, you have right to have rights. So you should have Japanese nationality or like any other nationality. This makes sense. But if so, should we enforce nationality for human rights? A nationality is related to identity, not only rights, but also the identity of each individual. And some people do not wish to acquire a particular nationality for historical and or identity reasons. There's one interesting case of Chosen-seki Zainichi Koreans. Chosen-seki Zainichi Koreans. There are a certain number of Zainichi Koreans. Zainichi Koreans are people who came to Japan during the Japanese rule of Korea from 1910 until the end of World War II. Then they have children and grandchildren, and they are called as Zainichi Koreans. And basically, if they don't do anything, they don't have Japanese nationality. Well, there were possibilities of naturalization, but if they didn't do that, they don't have Japanese nationality in the first place. Then there are other possibilities. They can acquire a particular nationality. One possible, like big possibility, is the acquisition of the nationality of the Republic of Korea, so South Korea. But there are a certain number of people who don't wish to acquire nationality of South Korea. And the reason is not necessarily they don't like South Korean government, but they identify themselves as Korean, neither of North Korean or South Korean, but Korean, because Korea was one before Japan ruled. And after the end of World War II, Korea split because of the issues related to Cold War. Then we do have two states now. But for them, their home country is neither of North Korea, South Korea, but one unified Korea. But still, there is no unified Korea. So if we say that, well, everyone should have nationality, then should we or can we enforce them to have a particular nationality? I think this is one big question. And why is nationality necessary for human rights protection? Because human rights, by definition, is that human rights should be protected if you are human. Then why do you need nationality to be protected? This system may be something strange and maybe issues of the current sovereign state system. Because each state has sovereignty, in order to protect human rights in practice, nationality plays a very important role. So this makes sense. This makes sense. But so I think this really reflects the limitation of the current state system. And nationality is usually determined by birth. I think this is really important. Of course, there are a certain number of people who acquire nationality by naturalization, but many times, many people acquire nationality by birth. By birth means that you cannot choose. You cannot choose your parents. You cannot choose where you are born, but many people acquire nationality based on that. So maybe sometimes this is called as a nationality is a global caste system because the birth determines many things. And maybe the biggest, the final question is, how can we envision the future of human rights and nationality? I think, I think the rights of nationality is really interesting concept, but I'm not naive to say that, well, how we should think about how right to nationality can be protected. I think it's more important to think about why nationality can be protected, how nationality can be protected, to what extent nationality determines. Why is it? Is it okay to keep the current system? If so, it's okay, but why? And if not, then how can we or should we think about human rights protection? So this is my talk. Sorry, I talked about 55 minutes. This is 10 minutes over, but I hope we can have a discussion about it. Okay, thank you very much and obrigado.
Yes, Professor Akiyama, thank you very much for your brilliant lecture. And I was very happy to receive Professor Akiyama here because 40 years ago, I also studied about nationality law. My master thesis was about the naturalization in the comparative study of Japanese nationality law and Brazilian nationality law. Why? I was born in Japan. I immigrated to Brazil in 1954 when I was 5 years old. And at the age of 20, I was a student here. And suddenly came a notice that everybody has to take bar examination. And before bar examination, you should make an internship. And to be an intern, you had to be Brazilian. And of course, to take the examination to bar, OAB, should be Brazilian. Today, we don't have such a rule anymore. But when I was 20 years old, I was almost desperate because I should acquire Brazilian nationality in weeks. Yes. And then I went to Dean, Professor José Pinto Antunes, 1969 to 1973. Professor, I have to acquire my Brazilian nationality in few weeks. And I already asked for nationality, but it will take 6 months. And the next dean, Professor Manuel Gonçalves Ferreira Filho, from 1972 to 1974, he was a Secretary General of Ministry of Justice under the Minister of Justice of Professor Alfredo Buzaide, 1967 to 1969. And Professor Pinto Antunes said, well, you go to Rio de Janeiro, still the Ministry of Justice was in Rio de Janeiro, not in Brasilia. And of course, I took night bus to go to Rio de Janeiro. And I went to the office of Professor Manuel Gonçalves Ferreira Filho. And I humbly asked Professor Manuel to agilize my process of naturalization. It was very hard for me because I was member of a student movement against the military regime. And Professor Buzaide, Professor Manuel Gonçalves, they are all members of the military regime. And Professor Manuel, of course, he knew because I was a student representative here in this congregation. And what you came to ask me? Of course, he knew already what because Dean had called him. And of course, I explained my situation. And in 2 weeks, I got my Japanese nationality. So I'm very grateful to Professor Manuel. He's still alive. Yeah. But there are huge differences by the concept of nationality between Brazil and Japan. Why? This is a country of immigration, as in the United States, in other American states. And the policy is to accept foreign people and to become then the member of this country. Not in the case of Japan. Huh? Yes, there is some exception in Japan, which is the case of Koreans, Professor Akiyama mentioned now. But to adapt Korean people to Japan, it was a very huge effort because of the history of Japanese colonization in Korea. And still there are some discussion, which I used to take in my matter of my classes about the comfort women, about the slave work and so of Korea during the war. Huh? Anyway, slowly Koreans are adapting to Japan. There was about 400,000 to 500,000 Koreans in Japan after the war, but I think about 250,000 or something like that. So why? People, the first generation, they are dying. Second generation or third generation, they were educated not to be friends of Japanese, but anyway, the young people, they don't respect such education, and a big number of marriages between Japanese and the so-called Zainichi Korean, even for men or women, no distinction anymore. Well, so in Brazil, double nationality is very usual. Why? Because many people, many ancestries came from Europe, and I think all members of European Union, they are very, very helpful, or they accept double nationality. And I think maybe some of my students here, they have mainly Portuguese, Spanish, or Italian nationality. And Italian nationality is very common here because a huge number of Italian descendants. And yes, it will take some years to prove the ascendancy of Italian until the grandfather or grandmother. And but they can take. So many people has Brazilian nationality and Italian nationality. And there are some differences.
You probably know that my wife and kids are Spanish as well.
Spanish, yeah, and my daughter-in-law,
Yes,
she's Italian,
and Brazilian.
born in Brazil, yes, and after that she got Italian nationality, and now she is making effort to get Italian nationality to my granddaughter, which has absolutely no right to acquire Japanese nationality. But she will be Brazilian and Italian in the same time. And of course, Brazilian was very, very, how can I say, very it was very easy to accept double nationality in Brazil, but in the constitutional amenda of 2024, the amenda number 131, finally, officially, in the Brazilian constitution, it say clearly, Brazilians can have another nationality. So this point is completely different of Japanese nationality. In Japan, if if a foreigner acquire a Japanese nationality in Japan, he had to say officially that he is renouncing the former nationality. But if he is a Brazilian who lives a long year in Japan, the so-called Dekasegi people, they are living there for more than 30 years. Many of them, they are acquiring Japanese nationality. The conditions are very, very rigid, yes. But many of them, they are acquiring Japanese nationality. And they have to renounce officially in front of Japanese authority that he is renouncing Brazilian nationality. But here in Brazil, he still is Brazilian by constitutionally regulation. So if Japan wants to diminish that, Japan had to celebrate international or bilateral agreement with Brazil in order to ask Brazilian government to oblige Brazilian people to renounce, such as in the United States or in Singapore. I know that these countries, they are very rigid in the term of double nationality. Even people born in the United States, you're sorry, yes, the America, you're sorry. But if they have nationality of other countries, and probably they will have problem with other countries, or when he begin to work, as you know, the tax law in the United States is very rigid. Whenever you are, you have to pay tax to the US government, to Mr. Trump. And then many people doesn't want that. Yes, maybe it can be a privilege to be US citizen, but in some countries it can be dangerous. So, well, just to mention some fundamental differences between the way of thinking about nationality. In Brazil, it's very, very smooth, very easy to think about nationality. But in Japan, no. But I think, my opinion, Japanese population is diminishing. So, and there are 3 million foreigners living in Japan now. So I think Japan should think, or should maybe facilitate the acquisition of Japanese nationality by foreigners. But it's very, very, very rigid. Very rigid. So it's not so easy as in Brazil. In Brazil, yes, the conditions to acquire Brazilian nationality is almost the same of Japan. But the regulation, the application of regulation is completely different. In Japan, they asking the minimum details. It's not only to live 5 years in Japan, but they will investigate how you lived in Japan for 5 years. Do you have any traffic accident? Traffic accident, or even the traffic inflation? Do you pay tax? Do you have social security? In Brazil, they don't ask anything about that. At least when I ask my naturalization, yes, I fulfilled all conditions, yes. And of course, I want to ask my professor, and he facilitated that. Of course, in Japan, it doesn't exist. But anyway, the fulfillment of the requirement is, that how do you fulfill the requirement is completely different in Japan and Brazil. This is all. So excuse me, I spoke so much because I am so enthusiastic in the matter. So that I used that if our student, our colleagues has some question to Professor Akiyama, please do that. Does some people have double nationality? Alguém tem dupla nacionalidade aí? So, if you have.
Yeah, it's very common.
Dozo? Não. É dupla nacionalidade. É italiana também? Ah, portuguesa.彼女はポルトガルとの二重国籍。Por favor.
Yeah, I think this is kind of interesting question, like good question, I think, because in international law, well, there are many kinds of international law, but let me talk about one international law called ICCPR, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And according to that, if well, you can just Google it if you wish to. If you look at Article 1, it says that basically the rights written in the ICCPR needs to be guaranteed for the people in the territory. So not by the nationality, but if you are for example, if you do have the Brazilian nationality, and if you are in Brazil, the Brazilian government has a responsibility to protect the right which is written in the ICCPR. But if you move to Japan, or if you are going to Japan, then if you are in Japan, then at that time, the Japanese government needs to protect the human rights. I think this is the basic understanding of Article 1 of the ICCPR. I think there are different understandings as well, but this is my interpretation. And what it indicates is that according to international law, sometimes right to nationality or nationality is important, but many times nationality is not even mentioned. And what does it mean is really interesting, because although on the one hand, nationality is important in practice, but on the other hand, at least in the legal interpretation, nationality is not always important to think about from the international legal perspective. Nationality is not always important to think about human rights. And I think in principle, it's good because nationality, not nationality, but where you are staying is more important. I agree with that. But when you look at reality, nationality determines, sometimes at least, determines the human rights condition. So I think there's a kind of gap between how international law provides for and also the reality. So I think this is a kind of one enigma in international law and human rights protection in practice. I think this is really important question. Thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. And I think I want to salute Professor Akiyama again for this wonderful lecture. And thank you very much again, Professor Akiyama. And, yeah. No. And now I want to invite Professor Ryu Kojima from Kyushu University. And Professor Kojima, he came to Brazil. He first came here 15 years ago, and this is the second time he is visiting us. So he will speak today about very interesting matter, the flying car. So please, Professor Kojima. Então, saiu sim, então.
Sai discretamente. Sai discretamente. Peço desculpas ao professor Kojima.
Depois eu falo. Kojima sensei, からちょっとこれから授業があるんで失礼します。
始めてよろしいですか。
どうぞ。
はい。Good evening, everybody. My name is Ryu Kojima from Kyushu University Faculty of Law. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Ninomiya for providing me such a great opportunity to give a talk in front of you. So as Ninomiya Sensei mentioned, I came to Brazil in 2010. At that time, actually, I had an opportunity to make a presentation in Europe. So Ninomiya Sensei kind of gave me a very, actually, wonderful, actually, the invitation from Europe to Brazil. So at that time, actually, my wife also came from Japan. So we had a wonderful time in Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro. So this time, it is my first time. It is my second time to come to Brazil, and I have been engaged in promoting our international programs in law, which actually was established in 1994, taught entirely in English, and we have several government-funded scholarship program. And I visited the University of Sao Paulo and FGB Law School to actually to promote one of the programs to kind of expand such a network in the country of Brazil. So I hope that probably in a year or two, this very special scholarship programs funded by the Ministry of Education will be actually available to those Brazilian nationals. So I sincerely hope that in the very near future, we would like to welcome the Europe the alumni to our international program. So today I will talk about so-called flying cars. In other words, advanced air mobility. So my first question is, anybody who have heard flying cars or advanced air mobility before? Probably you did, because you're my former student, you know. So it's a bit unfair, I think. And then some of you may wonder, what is advanced air mobility? And then isn't it a kind of like a science fiction, right? But as I will tell you later in my presentation, actually, it's really coming. Probably not within, I don't know, in the next 2 to 3 years, but probably in 10, 15 years time. I do think that probably it's coming, even in Brazilian context. So today I'll tell you a little bit about the overview of the AAM and how it's gonna be implemented, and then if you really want to socially implement in a very responsible way, in a fairer way, what kind of challenges and opportunities actually that we actually, especially what kind of challenges we need to kind of overcome. So, すいません、ありがとうございます。やります。どれがですか？そうですね。なんか残っちゃってます。どうしたらいいんですかね。どうしたらいいのか。残っちゃいます。どうやったらいいの？一回ちょっと出ますか。Sorry. 普通はそれね、あんまり出ないですよね。あれだったら、may I switch to PowerPoint slides? I think it is PowerPoint. May I switch to PDF? これで消えた？これでいいですか？なんかちょっと下に残っちゃってます。いや、I think it should be fine. いや、ありがとうございます。Thank you very much. Yeah. Sorry about the kind of technical problem. Okay, so I'm from Kyushu University, and originally I started my career from intellectual property law, patent, copyright, unfair competition, etc. And then after that, actually, I expanded my research into so-called cultural policy because, the copyright is one of cultural policy measures. And so at one point, I wondered how we could locate copyright system within the whole framework of cultural policy. That's was the beginning. And since then, I have been actually working on various issues related to cultural policy, including cultural property, heritage, and urban planning, and all these things, etc. And recently, as I will tell you later, I'm conducting such research on advanced air mobility, something related to science, technology, and innovation policy. So today's content is as follows. So yeah, a brief overview on AAM. And next, I would like to focus on so-called ethical, legal, and social issues on advanced air mobility. Then I would like to wrap up my presentation. So what is advanced air mobility? Traditionally, it has been called as urban air mobility. But if you look at this word, probably it has certain implications because some people may think that this new mobility will be mainly implemented in an urban setting. But as I will tell you later, advanced air mobility could be implemented not only in urban areas such as São Paulo, but also rural areas, such as mountainous areas or remote islands and every settings. So recently, more and more people started to use advanced air mobility because I think it has a more neutral, actually, kind of connotation. So according to the regulatory authority of the United States, FAA, UAM is defined as follows. A safe and efficient aviation transport system that will use highly automated aircraft. So not now, but in the future, eventually, AAM should be kind of, autopiloted. No, actually, so unmanned aircraft. And aircraft that will operate and transport passengers or cargo at lower altitudes. Lower altitudes, what do you mean by this? It should be 500 meters to 1,000 meters above the ground. And with urban and suburban settings, yes. And sometimes actually the AAM can be also referred to as eVTOL, electric vertical takeoff and landing. It's a very literal translation, very descriptive, but actually sometimes actually it's used in those kind of articles and publications. Actually, we already have VTOLs, vertical takeoff and landing. Can you guess what it is? Drones, yes, but drones actually it's eVTOL, right? Because it works actually as batteries. So actually currently we don't actually we already have VTOLs, not electric helicopters. Yes, exactly. Yes, actually we do have helicopters. Helicopters are categorized as vertical takeoff and landing. They have heliports, and actually it lifted up, right? Fly and land. So the biggest difference between the current VTOL helicopters and eVTOLs is that the first E. So actually current helicopters has lots of actually problems, because actually I think most of you may have seen helicopters flying above the sky, but it's very noisy, right? Because actually, technically speaking, physically speaking, actually it's noisy because actually the helicopters has 5-10 meters rotor, right? And then it rotates. So that's why actually the helicopter is also noisy. And also actually helicopter is associated with these kind of strong winds. So that's why actually the helicopters actually haven't been able to come closer to our living environment. Some of you may rebut, if you actually go up the skyscrapers, actually somewhere in São Paulo or the other major actually cities in the world like Tokyo, Osaka, actually you can take a look at all these helicopters on top of the buildings. Why not? Actually, all these helicopters, actually the heliports, are mainly for emergency use, so not for everyday use. So if you really want to take helicopters in actually everyday, actually in daily life, you need to go to certain heliports relatively far from the city center. So VTOLs, current VTOL helicopters, actually it's not close to us. So this new eVTOL AAM tries to overcome such kind of difficulties so that actually it can come much closer to our living environment. And in the Japanese settings, actually, the AAM eVTOLs were also actually are referred to as flying cars. Probably, I think that it has certain implications. One is, for example, compared to the United States, these kind of aircrafts, actually aviation industry, were not close to us. Secondly, for Japan, automobile industry is extremely important. Right? It's a kind of driving force of the Japanese economy. So mainly, the Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, they're seriously thinking about actually developing these kind of new aviation industries as the kind of like a successor of the Japanese automobile industry. So probably because of various reasons, actually, when you look at Japanese, these kind of publications, this flying car, actually this usage has been mainly adopted. But quite actually, in my view, quite unique, actually, as a kind of like a Japanese usage, not a universal usage. Okay, so in Japan, the discussion on the how to socially implement AAM actually had started from roughly 2018. So Japanese government, two ministries, Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, and Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, they jointly set up a kind of, according to them, kind of public-private forum. And they issued a kind of the first version edition of roadmap. And this roadmap was revised in 2022. And currently, we're conducting an expo, Osaka Kansai Expo in Osaka until I think the October 13th sometime. So, and during this period, actually several operators are actually thinking about conducting a kind of test flight. Originally, actually did a kind of commercial flight operationalization was actually planned, but because of various reasons, both technical and also the social reasons, it became difficult. That's become difficult. But probably I heard from one of the major, a guy from one of the major airlines, All Nippon Airways, that they're conducting a test pilot probably in September. And several years ago, Morgan Stanley actually published a kind of report in which the total addressable global market would be expanded into $1 trillion in 2040, in 15 years time. In my understanding, this number seems to be a bit ambitious. I think it's a bit too much, I think. But having said that, even if, for example, like 1/5, 1/10, it could be a relatively big scale of market. So I think in 10, 15 years time, probably that AAM is probably growing into a certain scalable market. Okay, so originally these four business operators were expected to conduct a kind of commercial flight, and but as I said, it has become difficult. And here I would like to show you several examples. What the eVTOLs are like, AAMs are like. So the first one, actually, it's Volocopter from the German company. It's a German company, and you can see this photograph. Probably some of you can easily identify that this is Singapore. So before COVID, Volocopter, they conducted a kind of test experimental flight in Singapore. So that on the left-hand side, it's Marina Bay Sands, a very gorgeous hotel and the casinos and all these things. It's a kind of complex, and you can probably find actually the aircraft there. And the aircraft of the Volocopter actually doesn't have wings. So it's called as multi-rotor type. So roughly speaking, AAMs can be divided into two. One is with wings and without wings. So this is without wings. So probably some of you may think that it's a bit actually looks like a kind of drone. So actually AAM with wings, actually that yeah, it has more powerful and it can fly actually much longer. So yeah, this actually that yeah, without wings is probably in terms of powers actually that it's a bit weak, but yeah, this is one type of the advanced air mobility. This is Joby. I'm sorry that the aircraft is a bit small, but in my understanding, Joby is an American company. And actually, when you take a look at those, actually, that yeah, when you go to the websites and then if you click the investors, actually quite a few number of actually that yeah, actually they got a lot of money. They obtained a lot of investment. And from Japan, for example, actually Toyota also actually invested a certain amount of money on Joby. So it's a kind of shared understanding that Joby is exactly in the forefront in its industry. And I think actually that probably that Joby could be one of the first actually company to obtain a kind of license from the regulatory authority of the United States, FAA. So this is with wings. So with wings, actually, you know, when they lift up, actually that yeah, actually it goes like this, the rotors. And when actually that they want to move forward, actually that it goes here, then it propels like this. So some of you may have actually should know, you know, have you ever heard the American actually the defense actually the aircraft called Osprey? Actually, technically speaking, actually the advanced air mobilities with wings, fixed wings, actually the yeah functions like the Osprey. So I used to explain in this manner, but actually that I'm afraid that the Osprey has actually the yeah it has sometimes fallen and all these technical problems. So yeah, actually the yeah immediately after I made this kind of explanation, something got wrong with Osprey in Japan. So actually, frankly speaking, I regret actually having explained that like that. But technically speaking, actually, yeah, eVTOLs with wings actually yeah functions quite similar to such Osprey. And the next one is Archer it's also from the United States. Why I chose this website is that the message is quite interesting. Our goal is to deploy 6,000 aircraft by 2030. And if you look at it, you can also find another logo, United. What do you mean by this? It's United Airlines. So currently we have 3 major alliances in the whole world, right? One World, Star Alliance, and Sky Team. And United is one of the leader of the Star Alliance. Right? So yeah, so Archer is trying to kind of collaborate with United Airlines, and they want to deploy 6,000 aircraft by 2030 in 6 years, 5 years time. I think it's a bit also an ambitious number, but they're seriously thinking about actually implementing these kind of aircrafts in the very near future. And this is vertical aerospace from the United Kingdom, and it has also wings like Joby and Archer. And vertical aerospace, yeah, was originally planned to conduct a commercial flight during this expo in Japan, but because of also the various reasons, it's becoming a bit difficult. So actually, yeah, maybe I should show you. I want to show you 2 or 3 more. This is Yihan from China, and Chinese government is actually seriously thinking about kind of developing, yeah, these advanced air mobilities, and they actually said, you know, like low altitude economy. They want to encourage this kind of economy because up to now, actually, yeah, commercial actually that conventional aircraft flies quite high above the sky, and drones it's actually below 150 meters. So 500 meters above the sky to 1,000 meters, actually, it has been empty. So that's why actually Chinese government saying that, yeah, this is a kind of like a new economy. So-called as low altitude economy. And they're seriously kind of like try to encourage such kind of new industries. The interesting thing is that, yeah, Ihan is a Chinese company, but when you look at its landscape, it's Japan. You know, rice fields and so on. So one actually did a non-profit organization based in Okayama. They purchased this aircraft, and they have been conducted all these kind of test flights in many parts of Japan so far. So they once conducted a kind of such a flight in Kyushu Island, Beppu, in the Oita Prefecture. Beppu is very famous for hot springs. And actually, yeah, 2 years ago, so I had a chance to be there and then watch actually this aircraft flying above the Beppu Bay. And this is SkyDrive from Japan. And yeah, I also heard that they're actually thinking about conducting a kind of test flight during Expo. And this is Tetra, another Japanese company. But if you look at this landscape, it's not Japan, it's California. So Tetra is actually conducting all these actually experiment and all these actually development, mainly actually in the United States. And as far as I heard that they would like to get a certificate first from the United States, then actually that they want to expand their actually the business in the other jurisdictions. So yeah, these are the kind of like some representatives of the advanced air mobilities. And yeah, this is the first edition of the roadmap issued in 2018. Then the next one is like this, 2022. So I'm sorry that the letters actually are very small, but actually, yeah, after 2025, this year, actually the Japanese government is seriously thinking about implementing advanced air mobility as a kind of, actually, I don't know, using the kind of legacy of the Expo. That's what's written in this roadmap. An interesting thing is the final goal on the right-hand side, it says like this: provide new value, free air mobility in everyday life, and resolve social issues. So the final goal is actually, it's a kind of everyday usage. Some of you may think, oh, it's impossible, right? And then, of course, actually, I also believe that it takes certain actually period of time, but Japanese government, you know, those two ministries, actually, they already advocated that the future of advanced air mobility is actually for our everyday use, and also to try to solve various social issues. That's the final goal, according to them. But in order to reach this goal, I think we need to overcome a lot of things. So that's the kind of main issue in today's presentation. So how did how did AAM could be implemented? As I mentioned, partially mentioned, it has three distinctive features. One is electrification, as I mentioned. This is the biggest difference from the current helicopters. Secondly, yeah, vertical takeoff and landing. It's the same as helicopter, right? Then the last, actually the third feature is also very important, not only from technical perspective, but also from social perspective as well, autopilot. I once had a talk with a guy from Japan Airlines that they actually operate 200 aircrafts. 200 aircraft. What happens to AAM? Probably much more than that. It may be 1,000, 2,000, or several thousand aircrafts. If it is the case, how to procure such actually sufficient number of pilots in the future, right? Currently 200 aircrafts, right? 10 times or 20 times or 30 times bigger. And what's worse, actually, so that's why I mentioned social dimension. Because Japan is facing two critical issues, right? One is aging population, and the second issue is shrinking population, right? Currently, actually, people around 60 to 35, 65, actually massive people are now retiring, and then Japan is facing shrinking population, right? So if you combine all these factors, I think that it's almost impossible for Japan Airlines, or All Nippon Airways to procure such an sufficient number of pilots in the future, right? Even for conventional aircrafts, right? They may face actually a greater difficulty. Yeah, what happens to AAM? Almost give up, right? So that's why actually autopilot is essential for the future Japan. Actually, this autopilot, actually, or the autonomous driving, actually, that is also actually important for the other actually transport as well, because actually the trains, buses, right, and all these things, actually, yeah, as I mentioned, the number of drivers is almost kind of like is in shortage. So in 10 years time, 20 years time, probably Japanese actually the public transport could be extremely fragile, I think. So in some rural areas, probably it's almost a kind of matter of time whether actually they could maintain their actually public transport. So this is the kind of critical issue in the Japanese settings. So autopilot is almost essential in my view. And because this actually the figure is so nice that I'm always using it for the kind of like to give you a kind of image how advanced air mobility actually will be like in our near future. So if you look at this figure, it is a kind of figure actually that I borrowed from actually one of the reports published by Deloitte, the consulting firm in 2019. So you can take a look at two aircrafts above the sky. And it seems that they departed, lifted up in one of the actually so-called vertiports, almost equivalent to heliports in the left-hand side. And it seems that they're actually landing on top of the buildings, right? In an urban area. You can easily find out that actually, yeah, where are these vertiports? On the left-hand side, it's just next to residential areas, right? And on the right-hand side, it's on top of the skyscrapers. So yeah, some of you may actually be very skeptical, right? Is it really a kind of like feasible to set up these kind of vertiports on top of this kind of buildings, right? As I mentioned, actually that this is electrified. Mainly actually they're using batteries. If, for example, there should be a fire on top of the buildings, how could you do that, right? We need a whole bunch of water, right? And also, it works actually with batteries. So you need to recharge, you need to refuel such a huge amount of energy. Is it really actually is it really possible, right? To actually set up such a kind of facility to recharge such batteries within a very short period of time? What happens to another vertiport next to residential area? Do you like it? Because suppose actually you're living in one of the houses in those residential areas, and if actually the vertiport, heliport is constructed just next to you, how would you feel? Some of you may take it positively, because it's so convenient, right? I can take eVTOL anytime, right? And just 1 minute walk. But other people may dislike it, right? Because it could, of course, it's much quieter compared to helicopters, but it creates noise. And yeah, when the eVTOLs lift up, they may look at you, right, through the window. What happens to those privacy issues, right? Or you can also take a look at them, right? And also in this picture, we can only see those two aircraft, very sparse, right? But what happens when we have 10, 50, 100 aircrafts above the sky? We need to create a kind of so-called hypothetical, actually so-called highways, skyways above the sky. In this industry, technically, it's called as corridors or skyways. So the next question is, if this kind of corridor is set up above your actually condominium or house, how would you feel? It's not comfortable, right? Yeah. And then you may want to make certain legal claims, property rights, right? Ownership, right? It goes up and down, right? So if, for example, like all these actually eVTOLs or drones are flying above the sky, technically speaking, it may be possible to construct such claims based on ownership, right? So yeah, we need to think about a lot of things, even actually, we need to face a lot of legal issues as well. And also, as I mentioned, advanced air mobility could be autopiloted in the future, which means that all these aircrafts have to receive a whole bunch of data, right? Because all these aircrafts have to control by themselves, right? So up to now, actually, air traffic control have been, it's manned aircraft, right? The pilots were on board, and also actually, air traffic control has been quite centralized, because from the beginning to the end, right? That if you go to the airport, like Guarulhos or the Congonhas, right? There's a control tower, right? Then actually, after you, even from the runway, right? It's controlled. Even if after you depart, heavily controlled, right? It's a very centralized system. But what happens to these kind of eVTOLs or drones? Right? Because we have much bigger number of aircrafts. So, and then it's gonna be autopiloted, right? So they actually, we need to think about two things. One is aircrafts have to receive a whole bunch of different kinds of data, because in this picture, we can see two birds. So we need to prevent such collisions. In order to do so, actually, we need to actually anticipate, right? Where all these birds are. Or what happens, for example, if this aircraft faces thunderstorms, they need to detour, right? What happens to fires and all these things. So aircrafts, they have to receive a whole bunch of different kinds of data, so that actually they can actually control by themselves. Second thing is the air traffic control. Up to now, as I said, it has been centralized, very much centralized. But it is almost impossible in the future, because we have greater number of drones, greater number of advanced air mobilities above the sky, right? So if it is the case, actually the system should be more decentralized. So in one of the possible scenarios is that each actually aircraft should equip certain sensors, so that actually aircrafts can communicate each other. So we need to overcome a lot of things, right? So currently, aircrafts, actually, eVTOLs, they rely on batteries. But I'm afraid to say that the current battery doesn't reach the sufficient level. So frankly speaking, actually weak, actually. So, and that's why actually current operationalization could be like inner city or regional, because actually the maximum, actually probably the distance could be around, within 100 kilometers. But in the future, it could be developed. And as I will tell you later, one of my colleagues, actually, who is working on actually electric motor, he has a dream that the AAM can fly faster than Japanese super express train, Shinkansen, which means that the AAM, in his mind, actually AAM is expected to fly above 320 kilometers per hour. And if also the quality of the battery actually goes better, then actually probably the aircraft can continuously fly for several hours. So if it is the case, probably the aircraft actually can fly over 500 kilometers or 1,000 kilometers, which means that the operationalization could be intercity or interregional. Even in the Brazilian context, probably you can fly to those kind of bigger cities along the Atlantic Ocean. So how, and when the AAM is social implemented, it has lots of potentials. AAM is an advanced air mobility, And it's just a kind of like a tools, instrument, measures. So the more important thing is the purpose, right? How we should use such a new mobility, right? To achieve what, right? So actually there I can actually list up a lot of possibilities. So the first is flying ambulances. Currently, Japan has 60 to 70 so-called doctor helicopters for their emergency medical services. But you know, Japan has 47 prefectures, so which means that there are 70 helicopters are not, the number is not sufficient. So it is highly expected that AAM can kind of supplement such kind of so-called doctor helicopters, in the emergency medical services. And if also the ability of the AAM could become better, then I think that it could be also used as kind of power supply cards or water supply cards in emergency situations as natural disasters. Actually, when I first started learning about advanced air mobility, I simply thought that if we would have had such a new mobility in 2011, we would not have faced a kind of severe incidents in Fukushima. Because you know what happened in Fukushima after the March 11th big earthquake was that all these kind of the roads, all these infrastructures have been actually completely disrupted, and also the big tsunami hit the coastal areas. That's why actually that we were not able to approach to the nuclear power plants. So the last resort was actually airborne mobility. So if we would have had such a kind of AAM at that time, probably the situation should have been completely different. So that's actually what I thought when I first actually started learning AAM. So in the future, as the government mentioned, government tries to make such a new mobility as convenient and accessible air mobility solutions to actually solve various social issues. But in order to reach this goal, as I said, we need to do a lot of things. So to boil down, actually these two factors are actually extremely important. One is so-called economic rationality. To put it very simple, actually the price. At the very initial stage, actually the service of advanced air mobility could be very expensive. It might be much more expensive than these conventional taxis, actually, I'm afraid. So it's very difficult for the layperson to easily reach this new mobility. So we need to make a kind of maximum effort to actually price down this new mobility. That's first. Then the second is so-called time rationality. How much time actually we could reduce to move from point A to point B compared to conventional transport, such as trains or buses or automobiles and all these things. So actually in my view, it's a kind of combination of all these two factors, I think. How actually the AAM can be socially diffused in the future. So as I mentioned, AA has a lot of potentials. And actually I borrowed from one of the, one of the website, and I put the English translation. Why do so many people live in Wajima? A key maritime hub on the Sea of Japan and the region's history. Land routes are the exception. Last year, January the 1st, 2024, a very big earthquake hit Noto Peninsula. And actually, Noto actually got heavily damaged. And actually, if you look at the geographical settings of the Noto Peninsula, actually, the major roads were just next to the sea, because actually the Noto is covered with the mountains. And actually there was actually a lot of landslides happened. So actually these major roads actually got completely disrupted. And what's worse, actually, after the earthquake, actually several ports, actually the land goes up. So that actually the current existing port facilities actually became unavailable because ships cannot reach to those ports. So actually after this big earthquake happened, actually airborne mobility was exactly, literally speaking, the last resort to provide such a kind of disaster relief or disaster to make the reconstruction in the Noto Peninsula. So after I saw this, actually the all these things after the January the 1st, I actually came to realize, or realize again, that AAM is very important in Japanese settings because actually we have lots of all these kind of peninsulas throughout Japan, and we have lots of capes, and geographical settings are almost the same. Like the roads are just next to the sea, so that, as I said, if landslide happens, it can be unavailable. Also, and if the tsunami hits such roads, the result is the same. So and also that we can easily predict. Actually, similar things can happen in those kind of capes. We have lots of capes, right? So that's why I seriously think that we need to implement advanced air mobility, including both drones and eVTOLs as quickly as possible in Japan. Yeah, and as I said, it has lots of potentials, and even in the emerging economies. So in Sao Paulo, for example, traffic congestion is very severe, right? So sometimes it takes hours to commute from actually point A to point B. So if actually that we can have such a new mobility, it may be actually contribute to actually make the situation better. So it has a lot of potentials, as I said, because because AAM is just a kind of instrument, tools, right? So the more important thing is how to use it, for what purpose, right? So AAM has a lot of potentials, but we need to overcome a lot of things. So here, actually, we need to seriously think about so-called social acceptability, right? Actually, some of you may wonder why I've been conducting such kind of research. Because I'm a lawyer, right? And I started my career from IP. I'm doing cultural policy, but why Kojima has been doing such a kind of flying cards? I think it's a very, I think it's a very, a natural question, I think. So 6 years ago, in 2019, actually, I got approached from one of the professors from the engineering, actually, electric engineering faculty, Professor Iwakuma. And Professor Iwakuma, he's as I said, electric engineering expert, and he's he's an expert on superconductivity. So this is a kind of image which I borrowed from JAXA. They're almost equivalent as NASA in the United States. So JAXA issued this kind of image. This is the future of the conventional aircraft. So currently, we are actually taking, for example, like Airbus 350 or Boeing 787, right? So probably you can image those kind of, you can just shape, right? All these kind of conventional aircrafts, right? The future is like this, It doesn't have the kind of vertical shift. And also, if you look at the shape, and I'm using this kind of image. It's like a stingray, the living creatures in the sea. In Japanese, it's like a osakana no, it's like a triangular shape, stingray. So, and also that you can see several electric motors on its behind, on the tail, right? This is the future of the aircrafts. The Boeing and also the Airbus issued quite a similar image. So they have certain consensus that in the future, that those commercial aircrafts could look like this. So Professor Iwakuma actually he's conducting a research on these kind of electric motors, superconductivity. And last year, he actually made, so I also put some translation, world's first successful rotation test of a 400 kilowatt class fully superconductivity motor for the next generation electric aircraft. So Iwakuma Sensei's research has been very much focused both by these two, actually the major airline companies, actually airline manufacturers, right? Company A and company B, literally speaking, right? So and then this 400 kilowatt, probably that, it's even for me, actually, it's very difficult to image, to have a kind of image what it is like. But actually, he achieved this 400 kilowatt motor. Actually, in order to here, actually, that eventually he wants to make a 20 megawatt motor. And in order to actually fly, lift up and fly the commercial aircrafts, probably we need probably 10, 20 these kind of electric motors on the tail of the aircraft. 20 megawatt is quite ambitious. But actually, also the development should be made incrementally, right? And actually, for AAM, advanced air mobility, actually 1 megawatt is extremely important, which is double of what he already achieved. 1 megawatt, actually the motor can be equipped to advanced air mobility to lift up actually the full passenger ride aircrafts. Full passenger actually advanced air mobility can be 1 ton, the weight, 1 ton. And then in order to lift up these 1 ton aircrafts, we need 1 megawatt. And then 1 megawatt is equivalent to 200, 300 households, actually the amount of electricity. It's so big, right? So frankly speaking, at the current stage, AAM is not eco-friendly. It's extremely kind of, dirty. If we, for example, like these energies rely on these, I don't know, not from renewable energies. So so in the future, actually, Iwakuma Sensei is thinking about making these kind of 1 megawatt electric motor, and it could be superconductivity. And it could be much cleaner, much more eco-friendly. And also he added that, if these kind of very eco-friendly 1 megawatt electric motor can be available in the society, then it could be equipped, it could be used actually AM can equip such kind of motors so that the social implementation can be accelerated. So he asked me 6 years ago, we need to anticipate such a future. So Kojima-san, please, why don't you start actually the joint research of AAM? That's what he asked me. So that's why I started my research. And from 2020, one of the government funding agency called Japan Science and Technology Agency, JST, they started a funding on under the framework so-called responsible innovation with conscience and agility. So JST, actually, they made a kind of call for applications, and and then accepted the projects. The projects are quite diverse. Mine is on mobility, but if you look at the website, the list is quite impressive actually. And then including AI, also cultured meat. I don't know, these kind of brain. I don't know. These are kind of like kind of internet connection, and etc. 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 So when you look at the list, actually you can find a whole bunch of new technologies, emerging technologies, and such social and innovation. So we applied for the first time in 2020 as a feasible study. Then from 2021, we conducted a kind of bigger scale research until March 2025. And the team consists of more than 10 members. And actually the members are from humanities and social sciences, but also from the natural sciences. And from humanities and social sciences, we invited lawyers, economists, also the philosophers. And the reason, I'll tell you the reason why we need philosophers. And and then we also invited Professor Iwakuma and also one professor conducting research on so-called control. She also belongs to electrical engineering faculty. Yeah. So what actually that we need to actually seriously think about is cumulative impact. And we need to focus on the more actually so-called dense actually social implementation, namely large number of more frequent and more dense exploitation. And here actually we need to seriously think about social acceptability. And this is another figure actually I borrowed from the government of Quebec. And sorry, I cannot actually speak up all these factors, but this actually chart figures actually that tells us that we need to think about actually multiple factors, including participation in decision making, trust in the promoters and institutions, benefits and repercussions for local communities, etc., etc., etc. So we need to think about multiple factors, to improve advanced social acceptability. And we need to, in the case of AAM, we need to think about many things. And areas, height, time, frequency, speed, and all these things. But actually, these lists are not exhaustive. We need to think about furthermore. One of the key issues is the consonance with the surrounding environment. And I'm always actually telling this example. Currently, Hiroshima Airport is very far away from the city center. It takes about an hour to get there, to get to the city center, downtown Hiroshima by bus. So I think that there is a huge demand to directly fly from Hiroshima Airport to the Peace Memorial, right? Atomic Dome. What do you think about it? In order to actually create such a service, right, we need vertiports. So we need to set up such vertiports in the neighborhood of Peace Memorial and Atomic Dome. How would you think about it? What would you think? We need to think about very carefully, right? Because actually Peace Memorial is a very special place, right? It's a kind of sacred place. It's a kind of a half semi-religious place, right? And also the Peace Memorial, the park itself was designed by the very famous Japanese architect Kenzo Tange. And he actually has very strong, he has a very, strong concept to create this Peace Memorial. And also, actually, the Peace Memorial, Atomic Dome, is actually inscribed as a World Heritage. We need to protect both core zone and buffer zone, including surrounding areas. So, we need to think about a lot of things. The same thing happens to natural reserves. So if we really want to socially implement these kind of advanced air mobility in these kind of settings, we need to also consult with those experts, right? Those actually the heritage preservation or the natural actually such conservation, something like that. And and then we need to also think about a lot of things, especially another key factor is that we should not victimize socially vulnerable groups. Actually, we have acquired a lot of transport, including trains, automobiles, and also airplanes. And so that's why actually that we acquired such an environment, right? So, but in the meantime, actually the history tells us that we victimized socially vulnerable groups, and then we can raise several examples later on. I'll show you later. So actually, emergence of the advanced air mobility, and then it could be expanded in the next decades or so. It may bring a kind of equivalent, almost the kind of the same similar impacts compared to the introduction of these automobiles and airplanes and all these things. And actually, these actually transport mobility actually has a huge impact on our surrounding environment, our social infrastructure, and also our way of thinking or worldview, right? And then this kind of new mobility has brought us both positive and negative impacts, whether you like it or not, right? And also, these challenges are irreversible. If you go beyond certain tipping point, there's a kind of point of no return. Right? Please think about these laptops or internet or cell phones or about AI, right? Probably we can easily imagine, right? These pros and cons, right? Challenges and possibilities, right? The same in the new mobility. So yeah, that's why actually that we need to seriously anticipate the future. Actually, our funding agency, JST, they requested us not only those kind of solving technical issues on advanced air mobility, but also actually the JST is a very ambitious funding agency, a very ambitious patron. So they requested us to also think about a kind of fundamental questions on our research projects. So, and then they repeatedly requested us. So yeah, so that's why actually our team actually has tackled on a lot of all these fundamental issues related to mobilities. So we have read many books, including all these kind of things. This is a very canonical book titled Mobilities, written by John Urry. He's a very famous sociologist, and also I think the geographer. Unfortunately, he passed away in 2016, so we cannot see him anymore. But actually, this is a very interesting book and quite actually comprehensive and also eye-opening. So yeah, we read this kind of book. And also, this is another very interesting book actually, which we encountered, titled Rush Hour. I came to know this book in April 2020. When was that? In the midst of COVID. So until before COVID, actually we commuted, right? And then we took for granted, right? But all of a sudden, actually we were told by the government not to commute, right? Not to go shopping, not to move, right? As much as possible. Then actually we came to realize, right, the value of such mobility. So rush hour, yeah, could be seen in Sao Paulo. Without such actually automobiles, or in the Japanese context, without trains, buses, it's impossible, right? Because trains probably firstly enabled us to commute from our residences to those workplaces, right? So that's why actually that we commute, go back and forth. So yeah, actually the thinking about new mobility is thinking about our life, how we live, right? So that's what actually the funding agency has repeatedly requested us. It has been a challenge, right? Because just actually focusing on technical issues at AAM too much, right? That's enough. But JST has actually repeatedly actually required us to do more. Right? You should do more. You should do more. So yeah. Of course, it was tough, but at the same time, actually, I'm very grateful to JST as well, because actually, I came to actually our team was able to kind of expand their view as well, right? And also think critically, right? Why actually we need AAM, or and then if we really want to implement in a kind of positive way, what kind of things we need to overcome, all these things, right? And also we came to realize that we need to learn from the past, right? Both good things and bad things, right? And yeah, victimization of the socially vulnerable groups. One of the members actually shared this information titled "A Brief History of How Racism Shaped Interstate Highways in the United States." You know, if you go to the United States, actually, we can see a lot of those interstate highways like I-10, I-20, I-90, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, in US history, it seems that, construction of such interstate highways victimize socially vulnerable groups, namely Black community. You know, highways is completely different from those ordinary roads.
these ordinary roads had so-called road signs. And along the road, you can find residential areas, shops, restaurants, offices, hospitals, and all these things. Highways, completely different, right? They have so-called interchanges, but between interchanges, nothing. So if you live closer to these actually exits and entrances, of course, it may be actually better off. You may be better off, maybe better off. But what happens to those people actually in the middle? Just the negative externality, right? Emissions and all these things, right? So it seems that this is a history in the United States. And then I do believe that we should not repeat such mistakes again, right? So, yeah, so if AAM wants to become such, convenient and accessible mobility, we need to probably observe such social changes. And also we need to prepare and anticipate, right, now. And without such kind of anticipation and preparation, probably the AAM cannot actually contribute to our well-beings. And and as I said, AAM is not clean, it's not eco-friendly. And it may be the case that the AAM can be exclusively used by those rich people. I think it's a huge irony, right? Government says that it could be a kind of accessible mobility, but it may not be. So it depends on us, right? How we would socially implement, right? Last year, UN organization, ICAO, in Montreal, they organized a first conference on AAM. So I went to Montreal last year, and then it was worth it. And during this conference, they issued a so-called call to action. And actually, they emphasized the very important messages, including equity and inclusion, and saving lives and delivering critical support. So, so in my view, these actually points are international standard. So if we really want to socially implement in the Japanese context, we need to actually satisfy these conditions. Otherwise, actually, it's very embarrassing. It's my belief. So in order to actually, how do we socially implement in a better way? I think the future direction, and which is currently in progress, is to create so-called hybrid forums in each actually implemented areas. So in this hybrid forum, we expect a kind of diverse participation from actually different professions, different attributes, and actually diverse people. So multiple stakeholders and conducting social engagement and deliberative discussion. So this is an idea coming from the French philosopher Michel Calon. But the interesting thing is that it's not only the kind of theory now in European Union. If you want to get money from European Union, EU fundings, actually European Union actually kind of stresses the value of setting up such kind of forum actually in those projects. So it's now actually kind of an incorporated in the real world. So that's why actually I want to also achieve this kind of things in Japan. So recently, we set up a cooperation agreement between one of the prefectural government, Yamanashi Prefecture, the opposite side of Mount Fuji. If you travel from Tokyo to Kyoto using Shinkansen, you can see the front side of Mount Fuji, but Yamanashi is on the opposite side, right? And so recently, the Yamanashi Prefectural Government, Japan Airlines, one of the major airlines in Japan, and one think tank conducting social research, University of Yamanashi, and our university, Kyushu University. 2 months ago, we set up we signed this actually cooperation agreement. And we're now we're now about to start a new project in Yamanashi. So after I go back to Japan in a week or so, I'm going to Yamanashi in the beginning of September, and then staying there for 10 days. We're conducting a kind of like a field trip with those students in the various regions in Yamanashi to start our discussions with local businesses, local citizens, and all these kind of things. So we're trying to set up these kind of hybrid forum in the in a very real, actually, we want to materialize this hybrid forum in Yamanashi Prefecture. Okay, so sorry I talked too much, but thank you very much for your attention.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Professor Kojima. It was very, very instructive, very provocative, and very interesting matter. We, of course, we didn't know anything about that, but the support of international organizations such as ICAO, or support of Japanese government institutions such as JST or JAXA, and well, it's very hopeful to see this in near future, I think. And the most important master is that it's very soft to the atmosphere and ambient of the earth. So it's not use the does not emission of carbon, or not use the fuel, or not only the oil fuel or fuel made by petrol, but by even to ethanol. But I think it's a very interesting project of future.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Yeah.
Do you have any question to Professor Kojima?
Yes, Diogo-san? Do you have microphones? Maybe. I think it's actually that a kind of
I think in the future.
the broadcasted maybe via Zoom. So why don't you come to the front? Yeah, here actually we have another microphone. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, so thank you so much for the very instructive presentation. It's more so of a comment, but also a question to you. But I guess having sustainability as maybe the center point for eVTOLs or advanced air mobility is super important. And I was also in my mind thinking how here in Brazil, but also the United States, we thought that we could fix the problems of traffic by adding more lanes to the roads. And in Sao Paulo especially, that hasn't solved anything. Rather has it made more complicated and even more polluted. So I do believe that having sustainability as even more so like an ideological response is something that should be also on the center point of eVTOLs and advanced air mobility. And I was just curious to know if in the future, is there going to be like a main role for those flying cars to have as a collective usage, more so like or as an individual means of transportation, but more so like on smart air buses for something or something that we can use.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a very good question. I actually, I actually did a travel to South Africa, then came to Brazil, and then I actually also actually received very similar questions in South African settings as well. So yeah, currently because the battery is so weak, I'm afraid to say that actually it's very difficult to actually make such kind of flying buses. So maximum actually there are 3 to 4 passengers. But if actually because Iwakuma Sensei is seriously thinking about actually developing such a bigger power such electric motors. So if the quality of the advanced mobilities actually becomes better, then of course actually we could easily assume that why don't we introduce such kind of buses and all these things as well. So if it is the case, probably that I think that it could be a kind of, as you said, collective, right? So this is the kind of irony, right? Because on the one hand, actually, that as I said, at the very initial stage, actually that it could be the service, even the service like taxi, actually air taxi could be very expensive, right? So it could be exclusively for actually those rich people, right? But actually the government says that yeah, no, final goal is different, right? It could serve for everybody. Right? So this is the kind of dilemma, irony, and also the gap, how to fill it, right?
I think
And
we can,
I think it's very important to social acceptability, because if it's exclusively used for rich people, actually the social acceptability is extremely low. A lot of people feel some kind of hostility, right?
thank you, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. And yes, please.
Yeah, does it work? Okay, because I'm shy and then I want to be sitting for that. But first of all, thank you so much for the presentation. I think personally it's the first time I hear about it, and I'm already so interested in boiling with a lot of ideas about it. So I think one thing that I would like to hear from you, Professor, is when we put the balances between risk and benefits, I think as lawyers and regulators tend to not be willing to add risk to the system and to the society.
Yeah.
But as you went through your presentation, I kept thinking about the comparison between trains and cars. So, well, trains are more secure because they have a fixed pathway. And on the other hand, we have the cars on the roads, which are more likely to have accidents and so, but they give a lot of more flexibility to the system. And the mobility point here in Sao Paulo is, I think everyone that lives here, if you try to go to the airport from the financial center of Sao Paulo on a Friday when it's raining, it will take you easily 3 hours to get there. So we have really reached our limited capacity. So on your perspective from the legal side, what are maybe the values that we should prioritize when we are analyzing that implementation?
Thank you very much for your very interesting question. At the very initial stage, actually, the safety of the advanced air mobility should be exactly the same as conventional commercial aircrafts, like Boeing 787 or the Airbus 350. So actually, today I mainly focused on the social acceptability, social problems. But actually, a lot of problems, first of all, should be solved technically. So is the current conventional aircrafts. You know, there are a certain number of people who are afraid of actually taking airplanes, right? Even though actually their airplane is probably one of the most safest mobility in this society, right? Yeah, I know some people, right, who wants to take Shinkansen from Fukuoka to Tokyo, not actually taking airplanes. Right? So first of all, actually, we need to solve a lot of things technically. Right? Either the aircraft, either these kind of actually air traffic control and information, all these actually things and so on, everything, right? Vertiports and so on. We need to first actually solve a lot of things technically. Then actually there are social issues come about. So at the very initial stage, as I already mentioned, the safety of the AAM should be exactly the same as conventional aircrafts. But the thing is that, as I already mentioned, actually in the beginning, probably the number of aircraft is very limited, very small. But what happens if, for example, in 10 years time, 20 years time, when actually that we have bigger number of aircraft? Because here actually comes the kind of like the terminology, flying cars, right? So cars, automobiles, they're commodity, right? Not like those kind of aircrafts, right? So commodities, probably the safety should be much lower. Right? So at the very initial stage, it could be okay. But in the future, right? Not probably within 5-10 years time, probably 20 years time, 30 years time, if we have, I don't know, thousands, right? Or millions of aircraft in all over the world, probably that it may be difficult to actually secure the same standard as those conventional aircrafts. Right? So here probably comes so actually these kind of discussions should also vary depending on the kind of developmental stage. So the risk, right? They're actually is completely different from the stage 1 and stage 2 or stage 3. So that's my view. And yeah, the risk and benefits. Yes, actually, it's a very important actually the points to how to improve social acceptability. Right? Even if actually we have certain risk, suppose actually we have a greater benefit, probably we kind of embrace or tolerate to some extent. So that's why actually the important thing is not to hide, not to conceal. Actually, these kind of, we tend to focus on positive sides, right? But at the same time, actually, the more important thing is actually that we need to also point out the possible negative sides as well. And then we need to have such a very open discussion in hybrid forum. And another actually the important consideration is that, actually the implementation in each district's regions are different from place to place, because each regions, depending on their local settings, they have different problems. They have challenges, but at the same time, actually, they have actually opportunities as well. Right? So that's the reason why actually we try to kind of approach those actually different parts of the Yamanashi prefecture. Right? Even within Yamanashi prefecture, actually, those 4 actually the places, they're completely different. So one place is very remote, it's a village, very detached, and then another place, actually, it's also a kind of very small town, but actually, this actually place, actually, sometimes actually suffers from flood. So when actually they have torrential rain, and then recently, actually, as I mentioned, Japan has been actually facing all these natural disasters almost every year, almost every season. Right? A couple of days ago, there was a torrential rain in Kyushu area, and actually the flood happened. So in this actually place, actually when the flood happens, actually this community can be easily isolated. So that's why actually they actually have a certain hope of acquiring these kind of new air mobility to actually provide them the kind of like, the everyday actually commodities and all these, and then in some cases, disaster actually relief and disaster reconstruction, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why actually we need to approach actually different places, right? And also we need to talk with local people, right? What kind of actually their expectations and what kind of concerns they have, right? So sometimes we may be criticized, but that's okay. That's what also the guy from JAO says. Yeah. So it's a very tough process, right? Because saying is easy and doing is very difficult, right? How to overcome actually how to make such a constructive dialogue with them. And sometimes we could be criticized and we may feel disappointed, right? But actually that's the necessary procedure, I think, inevitable procedure. If we really make implementation better in a responsible way, probably. So that's why actually the prefectural government, JAO, and the 5 of us, we're trying to make our best effort to achieve that. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your presentation. It was really interesting. My question, I will divide in 3 questions.
Yes.
So
I'll do my best.
in order to achieve such important goals, do you believe there should be an international law to regulate this? And also, if you think the current international laws are sufficient to achieve these goals, like for instance, the WTO's TRIP agreement on IP rights, if there's something that should be changed, and also how to achieve such goals within a world it's more challenging with lesser cooperation between the countries and so on. So how do you think this new global scenario will make things more difficult or easier?
I think it's a
Thank you.
very difficult question, and to some extent, it's a bit delicate question. ICAO is trying to make their best effort, right, to create such a kind of an environment. So that's why they actually organized such a first conference last year. Then probably the second conference will be held in 2025 in some parts of the world. So yes, we need international such a cooperation. That's for sure. And then actually, in terms of social implementation, actually, we need to think about several layers in terms of regulation. National regulation or international regulation, should actually satisfy the kind of like a minimum, actually, the safety standard whenever you implement, right? Either in Brazil, in Japan, or in China, or wherever, actually, those aircraft should satisfy minimum actually level. And then probably that's what's the national government or the international actually such kind of regulation should achieve. And actually, as I mentioned, implementation is actually conducted in regional settings, right? So that's why actually that we need to also actually that the local the government should take certain initiative. And in Japan, actually, that we have somewhere in the middle, so-called prefecture. We have 47 prefectures, right? So prefectures also, they should take certain role, right? In terms of coordination and all these things. And sometimes actually that, they have the regulatory power on the such actually the social infrastructure, such as ports and all these things, right? So actually that depending on the layer, actually that each actually that depending on each level, actually what kind of initiative they should take is different. And internationally, the current actually aircraft, the Airbus, Boeing, it's okay because it's flying everywhere in the world. But I don't know, for example, it's a bit delicate question, as I mentioned, because, for example, actually in China, for example, actually there are a certain number of Chinese-made aircraft is flying. But I'm not for sure whether actually that they acquired such a kind of like a certificate in other jurisdictions. So Boeing, Airbus, actually technically speaking, and also that legally speaking, actually that they can fly everywhere. But I don't know about Chinese aircrafts. So it may actually similar situation may happen in advanced air mobilities, right? So certain aircrafts, they could fly everywhere, but some aircrafts, they may actually, but it's fully up to actually it depends on the economies of scale, right? And also that if actually I don't hope, but if actually the future economy is kind of like a more blocked economy, then this kind of situation may happen. So and then if it is the case, international cooperation may become much more difficult, right? Because actually those big powers may say, let me do my way, right? I don't care about it, right? So I don't know what will happen in the future. And then also, in the last 20, 30 years, actually international, these kind of, WTO, it doesn't function very well, right? In terms of, I don't know, these kind of platform regulation and all these things, or they're similar to IP as well. So actually up to now, actually in the last 10, 20 years, actually these kind of harmonization, right, has become extremely difficult. So I don't hope such a thing would happen in the aviation industry, but it may be possible. So, and then I'm afraid to say that at this moment, I'm afraid that I have no clue. Yeah. And also that actually the fundamental question actually because today I really enjoyed Akiyama sensei's presentation because actually you focus on nationality because it's a kind of citizenship, right? So one of our research members, actually, he's very much interested in conducting his research on citizenship. So citizenship is very closely related to mobility, right? Because, I have a passport, right? Without this passport, I cannot freely move, right? So as you correctly mentioned, we need a kind of place of origin, right? And then that's why actually we can freely move. So, and during our the research, we also thought about what's the relationship between such a kind of like a free movement and the kind of place of origin. So yeah, so of course it's a very difficult issue, and then also I'm also thinking about how to connect such kind of fundamental questions with this kind of new mobilities. But yeah, because actually JST was a very ambitious patron. So, and then thanks to one of my colleagues, he belongs to the kind of like he's a kind of philosopher. So that's why actually that I very much appreciated to have them with our members of our research project. So yeah, so I think today's topic should be actually should be related to all of you. So I do hope that actually all of you got interested in this topic, and then also actually please think about it, and also please participate in such a kind of dialogue in actually the hybrid forum in actually in whatever the jurisdictions would be.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, this was a opening lecture of my graduate course, International Human Rights Law. And I have a privilege to receive two important professors from Japan, Professor Akiyama from Tsukuba University and his students, as well as Professor Kojima from Kyushu University. I want to thank you for Japanese students who I think they are very tired, just arrived yesterday from Japan. And also I want to thank you to our Brazilian colleagues from Academia de Letras. I want to make public my greeting and thank you for receiving the Tsukuba student yesterday in this traditional Faculty of Law in its 98th anniversary. Yes, August 11 is a very significant date for us. In 2 more years, we are completing 200th anniversary. Yeah? So I want to thank you, everybody, and want to close this session and saying that not only you who are here, these 2 lectures were transmitted online for many people who didn't come here tonight. Thank you very much, Andy. Thank you.